Goeienaand, good evening, fellow South Africans, and there was a bit of chaos in the South African Parliament earlier this week, and it's crazy stuff. I mean, they're just talking about something which is so basic that you'd think it would take a second to resolve it. But the chairman of the Parliament is obviously out of his depth, and nobody understands what the hell he's talking about. And he's running the Parliament. And we're talking about a simple list of names related to the expropriation of land without compensation. And these are people who want to be heard. They're people who want to come before Parliament and make submissions. But you will see how chaotic it is in the South African Parliament. And this video might appear boring, but it just reflects how crazy, how chaotic the Parliament is. Okay, here you go. Oh, and before I go, please remember to subscribe so that you can be kept informed. See you soon.
That will come in front of us if we take the principle that we will not invite individuals.
Honourable Swart.
Chair, I appreciate this process, but my challenge is again the reliance on this list. Now, I've received an email, for example, from Mr. LaRue, who is an attorney. He sent a written submission and he asked to make an oral submission. He's sent a number of emails to the committee clerk requesting when will he be given an opportunity to make an oral submission on his written submission. And to date, he hasn't received any response. And so, Chair, how do we deal with this? Is a challenge. I understand the volumes, but here's a person who has asked for, and his name is not on the list. I've got a Mr. Peter Meekin of the International Union of Land Value Taxation. Another person made a written submission, asked to be heard as an oral submission based on the written. His name is not on the list. So it's a great challenge, Chair, and the only way to resolve that is for me to request that those names are added to the list, because I've got the evidence that they did ask, they represent the constituency. But I would agree with Mr. Koornoff as far as possible. Clearly, there should be a constituency, because bear in mind it's another 120 odd names, and we'd sit for a lengthy period. So I'm not adverse to what Mr. Koornoff is suggesting, but I'm questioning whether this correctly captures all those that have requested that, and then obviously we need to consider that, Chair. Thank you.
Honourable Kata.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chair, firstly, I want to just also concur with what Honourable Swart said. Just from our submissions, I know that there's at least 27 names in those submissions in the 220,000 that is also not appearing here. So I don't think that list has been worked through by the committee. There's just over 20 names. But I want to get onto being selective of who actually are called. I personally don't use a parliamentary address, okay? And a lot of other people would possibly use a Gmail address. So you can't go and penalise people. But besides that side of it, Chair, let us go to Parliament's website. Parliament's website is very clear. Any person, any citizen may request to make a submission to Parliament. It doesn't say that Parliament can refuse that submission. The only thing that sort of gives the committee the power is to limit the time request. So I think that we're going to make a very huge mistake if you want to try and limit people, because on our parliamentary website, how do you conduct public hearings? What is expected from you? It tells you everything. And the only limitations there, and it says any citizen may request to make, well, any citizen can do an oral submission. And the only limitations is for time. So I think there we will be treading on very dangerous grounds. Thank you, Chair.
Honourable Mukweli, followed by Honourable Mulder and Honourable Bumlwan.
Thank you very much, Chair. Now I just want to check if we will then, as members, say we have list of people that have requested for submissions, and then they must be included into the list. As if some of us, we don't have, our people can call us and say, I have submitted, and then I want to check if ever members do have a record of submissions before it can come to the committee to say, I know I have 20 people that said they have submitted. Who is entitled to have a record of submissions? And then who is not entitled to have a record of submissions? Because all of us can sit there and say we have a proof. Now, Chair, I will request that all of us, if we have to speak on behalf of our constituencies, will do so. To say, even me, I've got 100 people that said they have submitted, but I don't see them on the list. What needs to happen in that regard? So let's just move and then agree whether we allow or we don't allow. Because we are not going to sit here and listen to individual members claiming that people have submitted and we don't have a proof that they have submitted. Thanks.
Honorable Mulder.
Chairperson, we should definitely allow Google to make a presentation, because I see the majority of people here has got some connection to Gmail. Chairperson, no, I hear what the colleagues are basically saying, and the idea of a public participation process is to get input from the public. And we have to agree that the committee has gone out of its way up to this point to get inputs from the public. The provincial hearings, we've had the other hearings last week with all organizations and groups. We've got the written submissions. There's been huge public participation. It may be that there are some people still that urgently needs to make a submission and who have asked to make such a submission. But I cannot see us reopen the process with a further numerous number of submissions. And unfortunately, the list is a little bit misleading, because all you've got a name and an email address. But we don't know to what submission was this connected to. In other words, is this my fax machine wanting to make a submission, or is this some organization? We don't know. And I don't know if we're going to...
If we did so, then we're committed. But if we said oral presentations, the cutoff date for applying is such and such a date, then we are not committed to go beyond what is a reasonable presentation, a reasonable number of representation. We cannot listen to every South African. We didn't do it. Otherwise, the people who read the public hearings who never got an opportunity. You could see so many people lifting their hands, but we could only pick so few. Otherwise, those people could easily get together and say, you have discriminated against us. We were at the hall in Pietermaritzburg. We wanted to talk. I was not elected. Why now are you giving people who indicated to you in writing that they want to make oral presentation, and then you consider everyone there? What is the difference? So my view, in a nutshell, Chair, is that let's just look at what would be considered to be a reasonable number of people who applied to make oral presentations, and we cut it off. Simple. Thank you.
All right. Honourable members, let's conclude the other part that Honourable Brenbach has been on, the issue of going through the submissions, the written submissions. Let's set a date for next week. If you need 2 days next week, let's do that. You go through that process, then you'll certify yourselves as to whether all constituencies or some constituencies that are in a reasonable, as Filtana is saying, have done. And then oral presentation, if then the committee, after assessment or going through the submissions, decides then to further take some, because it cannot be all, it could be some, as Honorable Carter was explaining, that there is a limitation in terms of time management. It's time-bound, time-dependent, sorry. And therefore, but maybe it would still not be fair if we haven't gone through the written submissions. So I think that's what I want to table to members, that let's do that, let's complete that first process, and then deal with the list.
I just don't follow exactly what you're suggesting. Should we not get these 120 written submissions, and then we can look at them and see how many of these represent a constituency? That's the first thing we need to know. And if people have, and then that we can do by next week. We can do that. Then we can decide from this. I understand we've got limited time, and there's a number of names here, but it could be a Gmail address represents a constituency. We'll be able to see that from the written submission. Secondly, the issue about us coming and presenting. One member said, well, how do we have proof? I've got proof in front of me of people that have written, have made submissions, have requested. And in terms of the law, the advert creates a legitimate expectation. Clearly, there is a reasonableness, but when you in your advert says the closing date for written submissions and requests for oral presentations, representations, you create a legitimate expectation within reasonableness. And so, Chair, that would be my suggestion, is we look at these written submissions only. We can't go through all the written submissions by next week to decide who's going to be invited, and then we will be able to determine. Is that what you were saying, Chair? We look at these 120 written submissions.
Yeah, what I was saying is that the question that members are raising is that these 120, and Honorable Breitenbach started with that question. And I said, yes, it's the last one. But then you have the others, you have your own proof. So already it talks to whether those were last or not. That's the first thing. So the second thing then is that the only way we could then take control of the process is when we've gone through the written submissions, and then we are all sure. And then we bring the matter again for discussion as to how many further, or who further we invite. Because Honorable Mukweli is raising a point that says, if then I provide a proof and the proof is not found in the written submission, what then? You know, if she brings 100 that she referred to, so how then we deal with that? Because she would say, no, here is written, and we have no means of verifying that this person did require, because we haven't gone through the written submissions. Yeah, you want to make a follow-up? Okay.
Yes, Chair. You see, your time. The members here have already spoken about it, a 3-week period to go through the written submissions.
Okay.
There's an urgency to look at only these 120. And then if people want to add to that, then they can. And in this case, I would have to bring that written submission and add it to these, and then the committee can decide whether that person should be invited or not. But I think to get this process going now, we need to look at this 120. Maybe we can just put that apart in the room. We can go and look at that, and we can agree. Is that not the way forward?
Are you suggesting...
just the 120.
Yeah, you're suggesting, Honorable Swart, that let's just consider this 120?
Correct. But at the same time, the other 500,000 is due of that process that we are speaking about, the 3-4 week period. You understand?
Okay, that's a proposal. Then let's get other members to engage on the matter. Carter, Mukweli, Pumulwan.
Chairperson, thank you. You know what, I'm getting a little bit concerned. We've got Honourable Swart talking about 3 weeks. You said let's look next week at 2 days. 450,000 submissions. We have a legal requirement as this committee to apply our minds to every single one. Let's say it takes us 1 minute, only 1 minute per submission. There's longer, there's shorter. It will take us 450,000 minutes, which equates to 7,500 hours, which equates to 625 days at 12 hours per day. That is 2 years working 12 hours a day for the whole period. So what I'm saying to you is to try and say that you're going to do it in 2 days, that you're going to do it in 2 weeks, cannot work. My second point I just want to make, Chair, and I'll be very quick. We've got to be very careful. We cannot come with carters saying, listen, I've got these people who wants to make a submission or do an oral presentation. It's got to be people who actually submitted and requested in their written submission that they wanted to address the committee at national. We cannot reopen the process. So that is why we have to go through the process. I want to make a final, where I just want to say, instead of us starting to contact the people, and maybe it will be difficult to try and pull these submissions out, the specific ones that's on the list, is maybe for the committee to communicate with those people to see whether they are actually representing a constituency or a company, etc. So it's not us individually starting to contact people on their email addresses. Thank you, Chair.
Honourable McQueen.
Thank you very much, Chair. My submission will be that, Chair, as committee, we need to check and satisfy ourselves in terms of what is really public participation and what is a reasonable period to consider that we have done a sufficient public participation processes. We cannot sit here every day when we meet and try to find out how to approach to this matter. We cannot listen to everybody. We must satisfy ourselves as a committee to say, but now we have done sufficient public participation, be it written submissions, be it oral submissions, be it those going out and listen to our people. I would suggest, Chair, that we agree as a committee to say out of 120 names that are before us, we take a decision to say how do we then allow them to come and make a presentation, and who do we allow to make a presentation. It doesn't mean that everybody who have requested to come and make submission to us, if as Parliament we have satisfied ourselves that these people have requested and these are the only people that are granted to come and make a presentation who would have been flouted the constitution. So I'm requesting, Chair, let's agree on the number. Out of 120, do we agree that this is the number that we are going to consider? And if yes, how are we going to consider it? We cannot do this forever, Chair. We must finish. I'm requesting, and about the 20 and the 10 and the 5 that members are saying they've got, what needs to happen? Because if we allow one member to, if we allow Tebogo Mokweli to submit a list, it means we then going to allow Carter to submit a list. Carter will have a reason why we don't allow. I'm saying if we can allow a member. So we agree that those that are not before us, let us not talk, even start to open up for them. Let's deal with the thing that is before us. That's my request, Chair.
Umlwan.